I'm Jordan Hatfield, and this is Faster Film Critic. Today on the show, we're talking Smile 2 with Kolter and Chase Fugel. Smile 2 is a 2024 psychological horror film where the victims are tormented by smiley faces. This film is directed by Parker Finn and stars Naomi Scott, Rosemary DeWitt, and Dylan Galula. Get in, we're going cinephiling.
Faster Film Critic.
So, why are you guys smiling so big? How you guys doing today?
Good, man. Good.
I'm great.
Yeah, dude. I'm actually more excited than I thought I'd be to talk about Smile 2 Adventures of the Trauma Demon.
Yeah.
You guys have seen Smile 1. What were your expectations going into Smile 2?
I had very low expectations. I was not a fan of Smile 1.
I had low expectations for both. I saw Smile 1 a couple nights before I saw this. And again, I thought, this sounds like a kind of a simple concept / lame gimmick that they actually turned into a competent story. So I was, after seeing Smile 1, I was like, okay, all right, well, let's see what they do with this one.
I've got an interesting relationship with Smile 1. One of my favorite aspects of horror is psychological horror. That's my favorite subgenre of horror.
Oh, it's the best.
And the aspect of psychological horror that I find the most fascinating is the topic of our untrustworthy perspectives.
Yeah.
I love psychology. If I had more time, I would study psychology. But something that I find absolutely fascinating is how our beliefs and our emotions can be so untrustworthy relative to our reality, right?
Yes.
I mean, we all suffer from this. We all have things that we believe and we feel so strongly as true, and we're just dead wrong. I mean, everybody deals with this. Religion, politics, personal relationship, even our own behaviors. We're not honest with ourselves. We perceive ourselves differently. And sometimes we are just dead wrong, and I think this is fascinating. And for a very small group of people, it's not just the intangible aspects of humanity that are unreliable. It's also the physical. The physical perception is untrustworthy.
Yeah.
And what a scary thing. I mean, can you imagine if you couldn't believe if what you were seeing was true, was real?
That's why psychological horror is the best.
It makes it more fun and it makes it interactive in a way. When watching Smile particularly, you're trying to pick out which parts are real and which ones are delusion. It's really fun.
Yeah, I thought Smile did a great job of this. I was saying there's a group of people that they can't trust what they see, what they perceive visually. They live in a different physical world than the rest of us because of it's almost like they're in a dream. And then for an even smaller group of these people, it's not an ordinary dream that they're living in. It's a nightmare. And that, to me, is the most interesting and scary aspect of psychological horror. Again, my favorite subgenre of horror. I think this topic is just absolutely fascinating. And I think Smile, particularly in the first half, did such a great job of toying with this.
Yeah, dude, you were introduced to concepts that you didn't know. For the bulk of that film, you had no idea what was going on until the finale, which you could argue kind of works really well or maybe doesn't work so well. But for the bulk of the first Smile, you are on this psychological ride. And again, this kind of goes back to your point of perspective and how each of us has a very different perspective, not only of what's going around us, but ourselves. And that's why it's kind of tough to pull off a successful sequel to something like this when you kind of already know what's behind it. So it works really well for the major part of the first movie. But yeah, man, they're both very different feeling movies, I think, too, and how that element is portrayed.
One decision that I thought was brilliant in Smile 1 was Rose Cotter, her character, having the antagonist be a therapist of a psych ward.
Right.
Someone who's really an expert of schizophrenia.
Yeah, trauma.
I thought that was brilliant to have that expert start to question her own reality. I thought was really, really good. Then, about the halfway point in Smile 1, the film kind of takes a turn.
Yeah.
And it kind of leaves behind the psychological aspects and kind of embraces more of a monster movie.
Right.
You can call this demon in the Smile franchise, you can call it a spirit. You can call it a possession movie. Whatever it is that you call it, in the final chapter of Smile 1, it becomes a monster movie.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? The demon becomes a monster that's in the physical world. And that just did not work for me, personally.
Yeah.
I think it would have worked better if it had set itself up more as a monster movie in the first half. But it came out of left field.
That ain't a bad point. Because, you are left with a thought of, like, is all of this a manifestation? Is it a metaphor for, is this person's trauma kind of personified into a monster? And, Chase, man, I think you're onto something. It would have been a different feeling movie had you known a little earlier on that this isn't just someone's descent into mental deterioration. This is an otherworldly thing.
So let's move into Smile 2. What do you guys think worked in Smile 2?
For me, the most effective part of Smile 2 is actually really similar to the first movie. And it's in the opening scene. The opening scene of the first movie is great. I remember it was kind of given away a little bit in the trailer. But with this one, you had no idea what you were going into. So it shows that shot of Joel in the car. He's getting ready for something you aren't sure. And then he goes into this drug house.
Yeah.
And he's trying to spread this smile sickness, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And it's done so well. I don't want to give away too much if you haven't seen the movie, but it's so good. And it's a little jump scary, but it's creative in the way that it shows its jump scare, and it subverts expectations. And I loved that about this movie.
Yeah, man. Two things for me. So I think both of these movies are largely performance-driven. Both of the main actors in Smile 1 and Smile 2 put on performances. We're going to get into Naomi Scott, I'm sure. This had a fairly modest increase in budget of about $10 million from Smile 1 to Smile 2, and you see every dollar of that on the screen in Smile 2, I think. Going back to Naomi Scott, she went for this. She treated this performance like she was going for an Oscar. This is very much her movie, and hysteria is not an easy sell for an actor. I think she killed it. This movie would not have had the effect that it does if not for her performance. So it's both of those things for me. Budget well spent. A lot of kind of themes carried over, for better or worse. But the performances for me is what sold either story in slightly different ways from Smile 1 to Smile 2.
There are a number of things I really liked about Smile 2, and Sky Riley was
Awesome.
the tippy top, was the pinnacle.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
She was fantastic.
killed it.
When I watch Smile 2, it feels to me like the formula is exactly the same as in Smile 1.
It is.
Yeah.
That's fair.
And that hurt the film, in my opinion. It felt like I was watching another version of Smile 1.
Sure.
By the time we got to the final act, I was expecting, we're going to have some big CGI, somewhat silly-looking monster appear, and then
Right.
almost on cue, there it was,
Yeah.
And so, to me, I felt like that hurt the film a little bit. Did you guys experience that same thing?
Definitely, for sure. There's a lot of repeated beats and bits from the first one to the point where they become a little predictable. And when things become a little predictable, it does take away some of the impact. I still think it was done very competently, both through performances, the way the movie was shot. I mean, Parker Finn, he knows how to move a camera. And those things really matter in terms of, jump scares, setups, payoffs, all that stuff.
Yeah, as far as camera movement, there were two scenes in this film in particular that really jumped out at me. Number one, the very opening scene where
Yeah.
Joel's in the house and there's the two kind of drug
And
dealers.
it's following him through
Yeah.
this house.
The way the camera moves with Joel through the house and out the window,
It's just-
really cool.
Yeah, it seeps
Oh, yeah.
uneasiness. It's so good.
Yeah, that's really good. And then there's another scene, and this was minor. There was just a scene where Sky Riley is turning on lights, and the way the camera kind of moved
Yeah.
in and out with the lights
Yeah,
really grabbed my
kinda old
attention.
school.
I thought it was amazing.
Yeah.
I thought it was really
Yeah.
cool. There were numerous scenes where the camera work really jumped out at me in a cool way, and I absolutely have an appreciation for that.
And sound design.
Yeah, thanks. So glad you mentioned that.
My biggest critique of this whole franchise is it feels like Parker Finn doesn't understand the strengths and the weaknesses of what he has here.
Right.
It's almost like he can't decide, is this a psychological film? Is this a possession film? Is this a monster movie? And he just kind of throws it all in. And then he fills it in with cheap jump scares.
So many
Yeah.
cheap jump scares.
I was going to ask you guys how you felt about that.
Before I criticize the jump scares, I need to admit there were a couple times in this movie where it really got me.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sitting in the movie theater. I've got Chase on my right, and then I've got 2 high school girls on my left, right? And there were at least 2 times in this movie where I jumped higher than they did.
Right,
I was
yeah.
embarrassed. I was like, oh my gosh.
Did anybody see that?
So the jump scares were effective.
yeah.
They were creative. They
And they-
were creative.
they were
It was
creative.
annoying,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
they were still really creative.
I have to give Parker Finn that, but this really relies on the jump scares.
It does.
But I think if you're a high schooler going to the movies with all your friends, the jump scares make it more fun
Yeah.
than a dark, suspenseful, thriller-ish atmosphere.
Yeah, this film is dark.
It is. Jump scares, when it comes down to it, it's the cheapest form or the cheapest trick any horror movie can do. I mean, you can argue it can be done creatively with a little suspense, but it's not hard. Anybody can hide around a corner and jump out and scare somebody. And, anybody can do that to anybody. It doesn't take a whole lot of creativity to do that. There were some clever ones in here that were set up fairly well, shot fairly well. But at the end of the day, is it just jump scare part 2? I can see people sitting around going, well, what if we make a whole movie about demonic, creepy smiles? And how would we build a whole story around this concept of creepy smiles? It's kind of 2 cheap tricks dressed up as something else. It still works to a large degree, but
Have you guys seen It Follows?
yeah.
Yeah.
This is almost a remake of It Follows.
I would agree.
In It Follows, there's this monster that's kind of chasing its victim, and rather than the monster being passed on by trauma, it's passed on by intercourse. So
Right.
if the person being chased has intercourse, he passes it on to somebody else. And that aspect of It Follows really doesn't work for me. It's pretty silly.
The STD monster doesn't work for you?
The STD monster doesn't work for me. I'll tell you where It Follows succeeded. Atmosphere. The emotion in It Follows is really successful. It's really quite uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I do like the idea of changing the STD monster to a smiling monster. Like, I think that aspect in this franchise really, really works. I really like that.
Yeah.
I've never been a big fan of the smile, to be honest.
I like it.
Yeah.
I think it's great.
I guess I'm just a party pooper.
Do you find it cheesy?
Yeah, I find it really cheesy.
When I saw the first trailer for Smile, I thought the same thing. I'm like, oh, God, really? This is the best you can do is just, "Ooh, somebody's smiling. Yeah, come on. Like,
Yeah.
It seems like such an obvious setup, which is why I had no interest in seeing Smile and haven't, or put it off until I was about ready to see this.
So let me tell you what I think is cool about it. I imagine an evil being taking over a body which is something that they desire, that they are really searching for. And I imagine them finally getting their victim, and I can just see them smiling. Like, I can just see, like, there's joy for them in that. So I thought it worked. I respect your disagreement, but to me, I just thought it was a really cool aspect of the film. And again, it's better than the STD monster.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will give it that.
What are some of your favorite scenes from this movie?
Like I mentioned before, I love the opening scene. I thought it was very effective. And another scene that really stuck out to me is when Sky Riley and Paul Hudson, they're in the car together and they're arguing about whatever. And you know where it's going. You know that they end up in a car crash. But the way the camera moves from one person to the other and it's showing the road in between, like really briefly, you see headlights coming on. And because you know where it's going, it makes it so much more suspenseful. You're waiting every time you see those headlights. It's like you're bracing for this car crash. It's so good.
I thought it was good. Do you want to know something else that I thought was really cool from that scene? This is kind of sick and twisted. It's awful, but it still made me laugh. Is when Paul Hudson, they're fighting,
Right.
and Paul Hudson's being a total jerk, and Paul Hudson turns to Sky Riley and says, "Oh, you're crying," and he's being also sarcastic. "Oh, you're crying, boo hoo hoo. You're so ugly when you're crying," and then he starts to like gag. I thought that scene was so funny. I was laughing so hard at that.
Did you guys know that's Jack Nicholson's son?
I didn't know that.
There's a big,
Crazy.
I know, man. Yeah.
Wow, the nepotism in Hollywood shouldn't surprise me, but
There's a big scene that I was like, why does he look so much like Jack Nicholson? Is that? And then I had to look up afterwards and I was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense.
It's funny because I knew his name was Ray Nicholson,
Yeah.
and I didn't even think. I didn't put it together.
He kind of does the Kubrick stare
That's
too
what
in this movie.
that's
When he,
what I was-
especially when he walks up to the stage in that one scene.
Yeah.
It's like straight out of The Shining.
Oh, dude.
Yeah, but he doesn't quite have the talent of his father, but you're
No,
right. I can see
definitely
the
not.
resemblance now. Now that you point it out, I absolutely see it.
Back to Naomi Scott. It wasn't the actual car accident, although that was a great scene. It was her waking up after the accident. She's like hanging right above the camera. She's
yeah.
coming to. I have never seen, I'm sure maybe I have over the years, but the way she kind of comes to and starts to put together she's been in this accident, the pain, the discovery of what has happened, like her waking up into that horror was, man, I was like, her eyes start to open. She starts kind of spitting blood up. She's putting two and two together, and just, I don't think I've ever felt like I was there watching something happen in real life as it just occurred. I thought that was just, she played that masterfully. I thought she had a hell of a range through this whole movie. And it was kind of a bold choice to depict somebody like a pop star, but she sings, to my understanding, like for real for the movie. She dances. That's not an easy thing. And you might say, because of her celebrity status, that some of that might be a little bit innate in terms of her performance. Like, it's not that much of a stretch. But man, I going back to that again, I just thought she killed it in this. And that scene in particular, I was like, man, she is selling this.
I loved the idea of the pop star. I think she's always trying to please other people.
Right.
And she's also struggling with mental illness and addiction and everything. So right off the bat, you're kind of rooting for her.
Right.
And she does an amazing job throughout this movie. And kind of like a pop star, she has to smile, which makes it so much better.
Yeah.
Like, she's always trying to put on this smile for other people, even when she's struggling with these things.
Huh.
And then this sickness starts to affect her, and it makes it so much more powerful.
My favorite scene in the whole movie is when Riley Scott's in her house and there's all the dancers that appear in the hallway. The choreography in this scene I thought was fantastic. The way they're kind of climbing up the walls and they're not moving until she moves, and then they all kind of move almost as like one organism. They all move together and they come out of the hallway and spill into the bedroom. And then I thought that whole scene was really creative and really cool.
Yeah.
I appreciated that. Another scene that I really appreciated was when Riley Scott wakes up and she's wearing a Talking Heads tour t-shirt.
Right.
Bravo. Talking Heads is amazing. If you guys aren't Talking Heads fans, you got to check out Girlfriend is Better, Life During Wartime by Talking Heads. Man, such a great band. Love to see that in this film. Hopefully that'll bring somebody into the Talking Heads fold. Let's play backseat screenwriter here for a second.
Oh, boy.
Do you know where I really wanted to see this film go? The first film explores Rose Cotter's character as the therapist battling with her reality, what's real and what's not real. And we learn in the first film that if the victim that's being chased kills somebody and there's a witness of that murder, the trauma will pass on this smiley demon to the witness of the murder, and the original person being chased, the murderer, will escape. Mm-hmm. Well, that continues right in the very, very beginning of this film with Joel.
Yeah.
Joel is already aware of this. He's learned this from the first film. And in the first scene, he is trying to commit a murder to pass this thing on. I think the idea of Joel actually being successful in that endeavor, and then the rest of the movie is following Joel. We can still have Skye, because she was amazing and great part of the movie. Elevated the movie for sure. Somehow it gets passed to Skye, but Joel is trying to convince her to kill somebody to save herself. Now we are exploring the psychological trauma of being in that position,
Right.
where I'm going to die unless I kill someone. I think that idea is really cool.
It is.
It still lives within the Smile universe, but it's taking an entirely different perspective than Smile 1. I think that would have been so cool. I think it would have made this film unique, original, but still very much part of the Smile franchise and exploring a different side of psychological horror.
I think it would have worked really well, especially right as she's starting to spark up her career again.
Right?
Yeah. That would have been really interesting to see.
So that's, man, I'm glad you brought this point up. First of all, I like that Joel kind of picked two garbage people to pass this thing on to. Like, that was his goal. If he's going to have to do it this way, he's going to pick two people that, the world's not going to miss necessarily. The other part of that is, too, and you're talking about this from a hypothetical screenwriters roundtable kind of deal, is I am sure they had some confidence going into this that it would be received well and probably do well financially, which ultimately leaves the door open for a third sequel. No movie genre does better in terms of multiple sequels than horror. But that kind of brings us back to the point of this Morris character in Smile 2, which was sort of this kind of late add-on in terms of, where we thought the story was going. He's a character that's supposed to be helping Skye come up with a solution that's going to get rid of this trauma demon in a way that kind of she doesn't have to die or nobody else has to die. I can't believe I didn't see it coming, that wasn't going to be the case. But so maybe to your point, for the third movie, that's something that maybe they're leaving that out for the third sequel. But that's a really good point. They kind of dropped the ball on both of those attempts to do something other than what's been happening, and it fails twice.
I would love to see it. I think it's a fascinating idea.
What do you guys think of the demon in its true final form?
I actually really liked it in the first movie.
Did you?
Yeah.
In the first one?
Yeah. I was so tired of this, like, what's real, what's not. I was kind of just waiting for the character to die at that point, and then this monster came out, and it actually gave me chills.
Yeah.
Did it now?
Yeah, I thought it was pretty cool.
Well, I got to be honest.
The second movie, it didn't work so much. I thought it looked a lot cheaper.
That's interesting.
In the second movie.
Huh?
Both films are doing really, really well with critics and audiences. On Rotten Tomatoes, Smile 2 is rated 84% critics and 86% audiences. So people are liking...
Wow.
Yeah, that's some rare alignment for Rotten Tomatoes.
It is a rare alignment. People are liking this film, and so I feel like I'm on the outside of this a little bit in my criticism of the monster.
It was more interesting in the first movie when this demon peels its face off and it's got, multiple sets of teeth. And I thought, well, I didn't see that coming. That's interesting. I actually didn't mind when he revealed himself in the second movie. It was on this brightly lit stage in front of, usually you hide a monster in shadows and darkness so you don't get a sense that you don't get to see all of it. So I see Chase's point where it's like, it's too much. Now it's kind of hokey. And I think I also would agree with Jason that it looks kind of animated. It looks CGI. You could have easily kind of created this creature with practical effects and it would have had a bigger impact. But I thought it was kind of ballsy to show it like under bright stage lights. It hit a little bit different than it did in the first one for me. I actually liked it a little bit more in the second than the first, but I could see both ways easily. Yeah, I could see both ways easily though.
Yeah.
Like, it's a lot scary when it comes clambering down a dark hallway. But,
yeah. And it's a little bit more unexpected.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm of the opinion that less is always more in horror.
Generally
the
that's
more
true.
is left to my imagination,
Yeah.
the scarier it is.
Yeah.
I understand that point. When I was so bored with the first movie that when I finally saw that monster, I was like, that's pretty cool.
It's something.
One more thing I would like to add. This was my biggest complaint about the movie. And it's kind of stupid, but the product placement.
Yeah.
About
The Voss water?
Yeah.
Do you know how much Voss paid to be...
so annoying.
Voss Water paid $27 million to be the main...
Gosh.
Can you believe that?
That is crazy. I can believe it with how much they show it and shove it down the viewer's throat.
So I totally made that up.
Oh.
I had no idea that they even paid anything at all. But you believe it. That's my point.
Yeah, sure.
It was there so often that you would believe they paid $27 million.
Yeah.
It was all over the place. It felt like
It was so annoying.
commercial.
Yeah.
It felt like a commercial. Every time I saw it on the screen, whatever suspense was happening, I was immediately taken out of it. I was like, oh, here's the Voss water again.
That's funny.
Thanks for bringing me back to a commercial break.
Let's go ahead and rate this film. 1 out of 5. Chase, what do you think?
I always have a hard time rating horror movies. I feel like, in a way, they need to be judged differently than your average movie. What constitutes a good horror movie is it effective in what it's trying to do, which is be scary. And with other movies, I'm usually trying to analyze, kind of strict. And so with horror movies or movies like Smile 2, I'm trying to find a good balance. But I think it also makes movies that can do both be really effective in writing and really effective in its scares. all the better. It's like a diamond in the rough. With this movie, I think I'm feeling around 2.5, 3 stars.
2.5.
Interesting. Yeah, dude, horror is one of those things. Some people love the jump scares. Some people would rather have things left to their imagination. You know, what's in that dark closet? You know, I can't see it, but I know it's there. Your mind has to fill in those blanks. For me, because I was so pleasantly surprised with both Smile 1 and 2, particularly of the performances, the camera work, taking a fairly kind of lame gimmick and turning it into what I thought was a fairly entertaining movie with, again, really incredible performance. I had fun. I didn't expect to have as much fun with either film as I did. Both films, the first more than the second, kind of left me thinking about it afterwards. I think that's always a mark of a decent movie. I'm going to go with a 3.5 on this one.
3.5, Kolter. I'm glad that you like this film so much.
Yeah, thanks, man. Me too.
I stated earlier that I felt like Parker Finn didn't understand the strengths and the weaknesses of his film and what it wanted it to be. He was just throwing everything at the wall, hoping that something would stick. I also feel like he didn't understand who his audience was. There are aspects of this film that are very adult-themed, and there are other aspects of this film that feel so adolescent that I would expect in like a cheap PG-13 horror film that's targeting really young adults. And that really hurt the film for me, on top of the fact that I felt like the formula was a direct copy of Smile 1. I feel like I missed the bus on this film. I'm going to come in at a 2. Oh. By the time the film ended, I was like, get me out of here. I've seen this before. Okay. There's a lot in this film that really worked. So I understand why so many people liked it. But for me, it didn't work like I was hoping. I'm going to give it a 2 out of 5.
All right. If you enjoyed Smile 2 as a psychological horror and are looking for another dive into this kind of movie, I would be remiss if I did not recommend Stanley Kubrick's 1980s The Shining. Not only does it include demonic, creepy smiles, it stars Ray Nicholson's father, Jack Nicholson, in one of the best horror movies of all time. So if you have not seen this movie, do yourself a favor and check it out.
Thank you for listening to Faster Film Critic, and please join us next week when we discuss Conclave, a papal thriller directed by the award-winning Edward Berger. This film is already receiving Oscar buzz, and I cannot wait to talk about it. You can also follow us on Letterboxd, Cinetrack, and Instagram. Email us at fasterfilmcritic@gmail.com. Hit us up if you have any questions, comments, feedback, or review requests, and please share this episode with your movie-loving friends.